Hello and welcome to this revision video looking at whether the German economy experienced a remarkable revival 1924 to 28. For the purposes of this video, we're going to argue that the German economy did not experience a remarkable revival in this period. Therefore, we're going to start with our best evidence for this, which is in agriculture. In terms of in farming and agriculture, the government encouraged farmers in this time period to take out loans to purchase new machinery for their farms, but most couldn't afford to pay this back, and therefore alongside a global grain surplus in 1925 to 26, where because there's too much grain, the grain becomes fairly worthless, prices drop and farmers are making even less money. So in this time period, farmers not only have loans that they can't pay back, but their prices are dropping, making it even harder for them to keep up. So many farmers end up going bankrupt. And what this leads to is eventually in 1928, a group called Farmers' Revenge protesting small-scale riots at seizure of bankrupt farms, which was called foreclosure. By 1929, just to sort of add to this, agricultural production was still less than 25% of 25% less than it had been before World War One. So in terms of agriculture, was there a remarkable revival? Definitely not. Our next best evidence that the German economy did not experience a remarkable revival in this time period is looking at industry. So in terms of industry and big businesses, although there were some steps forward, so there were some improvements, it was not remarkable. So for example, the number of strikes did decrease by about 50%. But we can see that there were still 739 strikes in 1928. So it's not a remarkable revival. We could argue that it's just an improvement. Similarly, it wasn't actually until 1929 that industrial production levels were the same as they had been before World War One. So again, although there is gradual improvement in industrial production, it's not a remarkable revival. And additionally, it's worth noting that although technically wages on average increased by about 12% by 1928, there were lots of groups that didn't benefit from this. The middle stand or the middle class for one, and also lots of people who worked in mining companies. Mining companies reduced their workforce to try and make extra savings. And in 1926, we know that there were actually an increasing number of unemployed people. Unemployment had reached around 3 million. On top of all of this, one way that the government had supported big businesses in making more money was to introduce protective tariffs, so taxes on cheap foreign goods. And although that would mean that people would be more likely to buy German goods rather than cheap foreign imports, it also meant that food was more expensive for most people to buy. So in terms of an industry, yes, there were a reduced number of strikes. Yes, wages for some people increased by about 12%. And yes, by 1929, industrial output was increasing to pre-World War One levels, but it's not a remarkable revival. It's just a bounce back. It's just an improvement. So the last thing to cover is probably the most remarkable point in terms of the German economy and whether it experienced a revival, and that would be to argue that it was relatively remarkable that Stresemann was able to help end the hyperinflation crisis. So our evidence for this would be the Dawes plan, the 800 million mark loan and the temporary reduction of reparations payments, Stresemann calling off strikes in the Ruhr, the currency being made more stable through reintroduction of a new currency called the Rentenmark, and the gold reserves to try and prevent future hyperinflation. All of these things ended the hyperinflation crisis, which had brought Germany to a standstill in 1923. So it's fairly remarkable that Stresemann was able to do this. However, on the whole, if we're looking at the big picture, did the German economy experience a remarkable revival 1924 to 28? Then my argument would still be that it did not, because ultimately, although there was a temporary reduction in reparations payments as a result of the Dawes Plan, it wasn't actually until 1929, which is outside of this question time frame, that the Young Plan actually reduced the total reparation payments that would be made overall. So it was just a step in the right direction. So did Germany and its economy experience a remarkable revival 1924 to 28? No, it did not. Good luck with your revision.